Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. I know it looks like there are still a few folks coming in with the fog and everything. It's probably a slow go out there. Coming in on the bike trail this morning, it was a beautiful morning. It was kind of foggy and I had to dodge a few runners, but it's wonderful to have the season start and feel very fall-like, although I was not quite prepared to bundle up as much as I had to today. So anyway, I hope all you guys are having a great fall, and we here at Ohio State have enjoyed this transition of the seasons. I'm Jeff Sharp, Director of the Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources. We have a very exciting topic to discuss today, and I know you all are eager to hear from our four distinguished speakers this morning, so I'll keep my remarks brief. I do want to start by acknowledging our school's collaboration with the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences to host the EPN, including today's breakfast program in particular. Staff within our college were instrumental in working with the EPN to create the event we are gathered here for today, and we really appreciate the assistance from the Office of Government Affairs. Also on the subject of acknowledgments, please turn to the back of your program to read the professionals in the audience that, through EPN's registration process, chose to sponsor today's participating students. Many thank yous to all of you for your support. One of the goals of the EPN is not only to bring professionals together, but also socialize the next generation of professionals, and we really appreciate your assistance in helping us allow students to participate in this event. Today's sponsors, along with our School of Environment and Natural Resources and the Sustainability Institute at Ohio State, have made registration free for all the students attending. On your way into the room this morning, you interacted with no less than 4 current undergraduate students who work to assist in both registration, wayfinding and greeting, and peer-to-peer networking, training and support to their fellow students who might be attending this event. We are so fortunate to have you in the audience today. I know it's starting to get into midterm season, so thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to join us in this conversation. And I know that our student participation is a little lower than we'd hoped today, but it's fall break later this week, and I understand a lot of students have midterms that they're studying for, so we weren't able to rouse as many of them here today as we'd hoped. But if you are seated next to a student and you are a professional, please take some time at the end of the program to sort of say hello and sort of share a little bit about yourself, and vice versa, students. Let them know about all the great things you're learning at Ohio State. One of our goals is to launch these students successfully into the next generation of environmental professionals, and your assistance is great in helping us achieve that. Now on to today's topic. Over the past 7 years, the EPN has had at least 7 breakfast events focused on water quality, runoff, and harmful algal blooms. One program in particular, hosted right here on October 1st, 2013, featured the then 3 state agency directors of Ohio EPA, DNR, and Agriculture, and was moderated by our then dean and now provost, Bruce McPherson. I was at that program, and as some of you recall, we had some sort of serious issues in the state just prior to that, and it was a very well-attended event. Here we are 6 years later, and we're still discussing sort of solutions to that, and I think we're making progress, and I appreciate the commitment of everybody involved to sort of address these challenges that we've had over the last few years. To introduce and later moderate today's panel, and who will now provide introductory remarks on our topic area, is Dr. Cathann Kress, the Vice President and Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. Please welcome Dean Kress.
Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate all of you being here for this important topic, and I would love to welcome our 3 guests today who are going to be sharing then their expertise and the perspective from their agencies with us today, which I think will be a very robust discussion. So thank the 3 of you and welcome to our campus. You know, I got here about 2.5 years ago, and one of the first questions I asked as I walked in the door was, what are we doing with water quality? And shortly after that, we stood up a water quality task force to take a look at within our college, and then ultimately as we broaden that here at our university, what all are we doing, what resources can we bring to bear, and how can we coordinate those resources in a more effective way to make sure that the great work that's happening here can be shared, can be accessible, and can be utilized in ways that help people to make good decisions. If we look over the last 15 years, I think everyone's well aware that the frequency and the severity of the harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie's western basin have increased. These blooms impact a whole variety of industries and people. Whether we're talking about the recreational aspects up on Lake Erie itself, property values, whether we talk about drinking water, no matter who you are, if you're up in the Lake Erie Western Basin, you probably are somehow impacted by these water issues. We began with looking at what are all the different ways that we can help through the research we do in this area. And we also have looked at everything from the specific causes of the harmful algal blooms to the different best practices, monitoring, and even what would get producers to engage and comply with different best practices. One of the things that's clear as we speak with the researchers, as we speak with the farmers and others, is that this is not something that happened overnight, and it's likely not something that can be solved overnight. It's not something that there's going to be one practice that's going to solve all of the issues that need to be addressed. There's not one thing that we can do, but likely a tremendous number of things that will all make a difference as we look at this. Following up on the Water Quality Task Force that we stood up, we got recommendations from that group to proceed with a number of other long-term activities. So not just a water quality initiative for a few years, but instead to think about what do we do from this point forward to ensure that our college and university can be a good resource. And so for that, there's a number of steps we've taken that I want to make sure you know about. The first is that we have the first CFAES Water Quality Coordinator, and I'm delighted to say that Heather Raymond has taken that position with us. Heather, yep, she's right there. Heather is being charged with implementing the recommendations that came from the Water Quality Task Force. One of those is to set up the Water Quality Research Consortium. That consortium brings together researchers not only from across our college, but all the colleges on Ohio State's campus, as well as partners at other institutions like Heidelberg, Toledo, Bowling Green, so that we can more easily share the data sets, the information, and leverage each other's expertise as we look to the future. Our hope is that we'll make that information and research more accessible, shorten the time span between when the research is completed and when it can get into the hands of policymakers, decision makers, and producers. So we are looking forward to getting that up and running. We're really proud of the fact that our college and university can continue to be recognized as a trusted resource for science-based information on water quality issues. With the soon-to-be unveiling of the H2 Ohio plan, we expect there will be ample opportunities to partner not only with our 3 state agencies, but also across our college's 3 mission areas, research, teaching, and extension, to improve water quality. One of the things that we recognize that's important for a long-term focus like this is not just to focus on the research, but to change how we do extension and to also be thinking about how we prepare our students for the future. And so we're working across all those areas, ensuring that we will have well-prepared professionals for the future in all these areas. What I'd like to do now, though, is to make sure we have ample opportunity to hear from the 3 directors who are here. As Governor DeWine came into office and as he appointed our 3 directors who are here with us today, I've had the opportunity to work with all 3 of them and see the commitment and dedication that they have all brought to this issue. I've been able to participate in several meetings where they have spent an enormous amount of their time and energy on addressing this and thinking about the potential solutions and how they can help lead in the future around this important area. If you look in your brochure, you'll see that there is a complete bio for each of our guests today that will give you the information about each of them. As you review that, I would just like to mention that as I've had the opportunity to work with them, one of the things we did was we hosted all 3 for a research roundtable here on our campus and brought together several of our researchers with them so that they could have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions and engage with the research itself. I really appreciate the spirit that these 3 directors bring to this work. It's very practical. It's very much a can-do attitude of trying to think about what makes the most sense. How can we make sure that this gets addressed? How can we make sure that if we put policies and programs into place, they will be well utilized and they will make sense for the people that they will be impacting. So with that, I'd now like to invite our three panelists to the stage, and I'm going to ask for Director Pelanda to start us off by introducing us to the work that the Ohio Department of Agriculture plans to embark on under H2 Ohio. She'll be followed then by Director Mertz and Director Stevenson. Please join me in welcoming them now.
Good morning. My name is Dorothy Pelanda, and I am proud to serve Governor DeWine as the Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture. I live on the family farm where I was raised in Marysville, and growing up on that farm, we have a 10-acre pond and a 4-acre pond. And over the years, as we watched what was happening to those two bodies of water, we learned that what we were doing on our grain fields was having a direct impact on the quality of water that we were experiencing. It affected our fishing, our boating, and other things. So working with the Extension Office in our county, working with the Soil and Water Conservation District in our county, our family, my mother, my father, and my siblings and I learned that what we were doing on our land had a direct impact on what was happening in our water, and we learned over time to be good stewards of our land. I joined my dad in the practice of law in Marysville after graduating from the University of Akron School of Law and practiced law for almost 30 years, and then had the opportunity to be appointed to serve my same community as a state representative for 8 years. In that capacity, I was proud to vote on Senate Bill 299, which last year provided $20 million through the Department of Agriculture for the 24 counties in the Lake Erie region to address water quality issues in that area. Those funds rolled out at the beginning of this year, and things like hay buffers, small grains, working lands, and nutrient placement were funds that were made available to farmers in that area. And it's been a really kind of a pilot program for H2 Ohio in that regard. When I was appointed as director, Governor DeWine said to me, "Dorothy, your office is the state of Ohio. I want you to go out there, visit with farmers, have real conversations with them about what's happening regarding water quality in their county, in the area, because I believe that the people who are closest to the problem are going to have the best solutions." And as we've heard Dr. Kress say, clearly as we look forward to the future, there is not one single solution to this problem. The governor also has engaged the services of a think tank, and together that think tank has been focused on something that we will say is going to make a difference in the monies that have previously been dedicated to this effort, and that is this. The focus with this group has been, what is the most cost-effective practice, and what is going to have the biggest return on investment of that practice? And that has really been a very revealing exercise, as I think the other two directors will say. And when we look at the monies that the legislature has given us for this next biennium, it's not so much looking at what ODA is going to do with their money, what ODNR is going to do with their money, and what EPA is going to do with their money, but rather collectively, what are we going to do as a body looking at this study about which of these practices we know through the experts will have the most cost-effective return on investment going forward. So when we look at water quality from the Department of Agriculture's perspective and working with farmers, different nutrient alliances, and the environmental groups, and I would say that what is different this time around too is that for the first time we have the legislature, the environmental groups, the stakeholders, and the farmers all united to work together towards solutions. We look really at three things: nutrient management, water management, and collective practices. And so I'm going to have my friend Mary do my PowerPoint so I can focus on this. So when we talk about nutrient management, we're really talking about three individual compartments. We believe, based upon the research and the practices that farmers are doing across the strait, that a soil test, which will tell a farmer on a given acre or plot of land how is the most effective placement of those nutrients, fertilizer or manure, is going to be. We've learned over time that in a 100-acre tract of field, that this 2-acre plot may not need any fertilizer at all, but the next 2-acre plot might. And so by using a soil test, this can be a grid which the farmer can actually use on his tractor to apply what we call variable rate fertilization. We believe that one of the most cost-efficient and best returns on investment is this nutrient management plan with a variable rate application and also subsurface application of fertilizer. There are issues, there are complications with that because we know that the subsurface application of fertilizer is expensive. It also takes longer. But we also know that these practices will effectively keep the nutrients on the land. When we talk about water management, we're talking about minimizing the water that's leaving the property. And we had a meeting yesterday with our NRCS partners who stressed that this was probably more critical than the other two aspects at this point. You know, and they say that, in fact, because this year, 2019, has been a remarkable year in terms of excessive rainfall that farmers have experienced. To this day, you can drive through Northwest Ohio and see fields that remain unplanted, full of water, with knee-high weeds. I'm proud of Governor DeWine for being the first governor in the nation to seek the assistance of Secretary Sonny Perdue in declaring the entire state of Ohio a disaster due to excessive rain. And as of today's date, 54 out of our 88 counties have been declared that, so that farmers in those areas, while they can't make themselves whole, can now avail themselves of various remedies to compensate for the fields that they have not been able to plant. We know that conservation tillage, we know that cover crops are also ways that we can keep both the nutrients and the water on our land. And that, combined with a small grain crop rotation, are things that, based upon our experts working with Ohio State and other practice members, that those are going to be some of the most effective things, and that as a group, we are probably going to invest our resources in. But I think the most important thing, as we met with our partners yesterday, was that we need to hire the right experts in each of our counties to help educate and market the success of these practices. And so as we move forward and we await Governor DeWine's announcement of the H2 Ohio rollout next week, I believe that you will hear that a lot of the things he's talking about are going to be the embodiments of these things. So at this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Director Mary Mertz from the Department of Natural Resources.
Good morning. Delighted to be here today with all of you talking about such an important issue. You know, you mentioned in 2013 you were talking about water. So the Ohio Department of Natural Resources was actually created by statute in 1949. So being a history buff, I dug up the 1949 annual report, which is great. It's manually typed. It's in this little folder with the little gold trivets on it. But the very first section is about water resources, and the lead paragraph is all about the need to protect this incredible resource and the challenges they were facing back in 1949. You know, it's something we always need to keep our eye on, every single year, no matter what's going on. So we're real excited about the H2O program, and we are working very collaboratively, making sure we all know what each other is doing, we don't overlap, our activities complement one another, and what we've really identified for the Department of Natural Resources is some of our skill set and expertise comes in the form of wetlands. So when we talk about what's different today than the previous 10 years of trying to make progress with the algae problem, I see, there's a number of things, but two things especially. One, we got some state money to try to make a difference. That's a big difference. And two, a focus on wetlands. So wetlands are not going to be the solution to the algae problem on Lake Erie. but they're going to help, right? So they're going to make, I think, a more significant difference than people think. And so we're looking at doing some projects across the state that are strategically placed, that are placed, designed, and constructed with nutrient reduction in mind. But then we all know they're going to have so many other benefits: the wildlife habitat, the floodplain management. There's lots of extra benefits to the use of wetlands. So we're excited about what we can accomplish in this area. And in our department, we've roughly broken it out into 3 different areas of focus. So the coastal wetlands, these are wetlands right along the coast in the mouth of the Maumee Bay. We've identified some areas for our first group of wetlands to move forward. They're primarily in Maumee Bay and Sandusky Bay. And some of these are projects that have already started. They got their kickstart with some Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, some federal funding, so they're on the way. And now we have an opportunity to finish those up and make a difference. So some of you know Scudder Mackey in our office. He heads our coastal management group, and so he is really focused on those. And then you see this title, Inland Lake Erie Wetlands. You might, well, what's that? So those are the wetlands not on the coast, but still in the Western Lake Erie Basin. And Dave Sherman is here somewhere over there, so you know you can talk to him afterwards. So Dave is really leading the effort to identify strategic places that will maximize nutrient reduction throughout the basin. And we're just trying to work with folks who are willing and open. We're working with some municipalities, we're working with some individuals, we're working with some non-governmental organizations on really good spots. Now, what we know, I mean, you can't build 5 wetlands and solve this problem. To me, the death of the green algae will be death by 1,000 cuts. But we need to start making those cuts. We need to start working on it. So we've identified quite a few places where we're going to start talking with the property owners and the folks involved, and we're going to do some soil testing to make sure we've located the right places to put these wetlands. So that's sort of the plan in the Inland Lake Erie wetlands piece. And then statewide wetlands, I mean, this isn't uniquely a Lake Erie problem. We have lakes across the state that have algae problems as well. So for our first effort, I'm realizing this is my picture I use to remind myself all the time while we're doing this. So I went swimming there over 4th of July, and it was great. Didn't look like that at all. But this is one of our state parks, right? So this is close to my heart. This is why we're doing it, so people can get out and recreate and go fishing. So there's a picture of some of the coastal wetlands projects we're looking at, like I said, focused in the Maumee Bay and Sandusky Bay. So the statewide, you see the list. So these are just some of the leading lakes where we've had a problem. Everybody's familiar with what's happened in Grand Lake St. Mary's. And that's really a great test bed where we've seen wetlands really make a difference. We're starting to turn the tide there. We're starting to see a difference, and they have a pretty extensive wetlands operation there. Now, Grand Lake St. Mary's isn't Lake Erie. It's not directly transferable, but we can still learn some things. But we want to continue to help Grand Lake St. Mary's, Buckeye Lake, Dillon Lake, East Fork. These are all places with unique problems that we've already begun the work to see what can we do with wetlands projects there. So that's sort of the summary on where the Department of Natural Resources is focusing its efforts. As we identify places and where we're going to do this work, we're staying apprised of where the Department of Agriculture and where EPA will be doing work so we can maximize those benefits. But again, you got Dave Sherman here if you need, not to put you on the spot, Dave, but he's done a great job of coordinating with folks throughout the entire basin on how we can be effective and make a difference. And we're just anxious to get started on the work. We're anxious to get started on the work. We have internally a monitoring committee put together. We're going to carefully measure every single wetland that we install, see what techniques work best, see where we're making, we're actually moving the needle and where we're not. So that is our plan going forward. And I think Laurie's next. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also very glad to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity. I always appreciate doing presentations together to talk about the H2 Ohio initiative and how exciting and meaningful and relevant it is today. So I'm going to talk about EPA's world in this space, but I have to digress for just a second because it wouldn't be me if I didn't get off script for a minute. How many students, can I see a hand of students here in the audience? Awesome. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for your choice, your career choice, your path, whatever path that is. Welcome to our world. Thank you for joining our world. I was speaking to students on Saturday at the University of Findlay, and it was quite a diverse group of students in all disciplines, from industrial hygiene to environmental science, and you're all very much needed in our world, especially when we talk about water and just the fact that the approach and the solutions are so multifaceted that we really need, it's an all-hands-on-deck approach from many, many different angles. And I don't know if you're all entering the water world, but if you are, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be good. But we need you all, and I appreciate just your focus and your leadership and future leadership. You're here, and we appreciate it. So thanks for the opportunity. It's great to have, this is the networking opportunity for all of you. And I see several folks. How many folks from the EPA team are here? I see some. Great. Well, I'm glad you're here as well. Seek out these future leaders and talk with them about your experience and opportunities and help guide them, be mentors for them. So that's just my side note. I just want to acknowledge the people who are here and who will be joining us. When we talk about, there are all kinds of environmental priorities, but when you hear the governor talk, as many of us have, water has really been number one on his list. So if I could be so bold as to say what is his number one environmental priority, I would say it's water across the board. So, H2 Ohio is exciting, a little overwhelming in many different ways because we have water challenges throughout the state. So when you hear the governor talk about his vision for water, it really does extend beyond Lake Erie. It's really clean and safe water for all of Ohio, which is a really broad, big vision, but a necessary vision as well. So in EPA's world, when we talk about what our focus areas are going to be, and the only other thing that I would add to kind of what makes this approach different than past practices, and again, we're all kind of stepping into our positions relatively new, so I can't really comment on all of the history and everything that happened before us, but I can tell you that one of the things that I think sets this apart from past initiatives has been the level of collaboration between agencies and with external partners. I think, we can say honestly that since the first week that we stepped into our jobs, the three of us have been meeting on a weekly basis to talk about the challenges that we face together and how we're going to work together and with our partners to address those challenges. So I would say that the level of cooperation and what you're going to see from us, not only today, but every day moving forward, does set this apart from maybe what we've done in the past, as well as some of the other things that we've covered. So again, I appreciate the partnership. I'm excited to have our agency involved. When we talk about what we're going to do, we take a little bit of a different turn. So this is where I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit. But when we talk about the governor's vision overall statewide, one of the things that we lack in Ohio and many areas of the state is just adequate infrastructure, especially for disadvantaged communities. I've met with a lot of people around the state. I started in the Southeast District office in the Logan area. I've met with leaders in a lot of counties, including Lawrence County, and they tell me stories about people who actually put cisterns on the back of their truck, and Saturday they go into town and they fill their cisterns with water so that their families can drink water and so that they can cook. That's happening in Ohio today. in our counties. And so under H2 Ohio, what we want to do is leverage some of the resources that will come our way to help communities get the infrastructure that they need so that they can have water and adequate sewage systems. So we're going to be focusing on hopefully getting water and sewer lines into communities where we can make a difference. We also want to tackle the issue of failing home septic systems, because not only is that a water quality issue, but it's a public health issue as well. So we know that if you have systems that are failing, they are contributing bacteria and other contaminants into our waterways, but they're also posing a threat to people who play in those areas, who play in their backyards, who drink the water from which these sewers are flowing into. So we want to use some of our money to address infrastructure from the water sewer perspective and failing home septic system perspective. The other thing that we want to do is leverage some of the H2 Ohio money combined with some federal money to try and move the needle a bit on lead service line replacement, especially in daycares and schools. So again, when you hear the governor's focus on how do we protect kids, you know, one of the things that we struggle with is just the continued potential exposure to lead from the drinking water pathway, and that can be related to old fixtures, old piping in schools and daycares. So we want to get out there, leverage some funding to do some assessment and remediation work in that area under H2 Ohio. And then finally, we have placeholders that will allow us to collect more data where we need more data. If we need more monitoring gauges, we'll have the opportunity to get those in place where they need to be. And also just creating an avenue so that we can all three agencies can really work with technology providers and researchers to figure out, are there technologies or solutions out there that are emerging that we're not aware of? So we need to and want to open the door so that we're engaged in dialogue and creating the opportunities for people to talk with us about the ideas that they have as part of the solution as well. So that is EPA's lane in the H2 Ohio world. So you've heard from all of us, and I think at this point we'd like to invite Dr. Kress back up to host some Q&A, correct?
I want to thank all three directors for your opening comments and sharing with us the perspectives from your agencies as we do this. I'm going to open us up then with some questions for each of you, and also then a little bit of discussion before we open it up for general questions from the audience that's here with us. So you can start thinking about questions you might have as we do this. I wondered if, just to get started with the questions though, you all three outlined the programs, the direction that the administration is hoping to go with H2 Ohio, and the focus and attention that you're trying to put on that. But I wondered if each of you might start us out by talking a little bit from your agency's perspective, what's getting better and what isn't.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what's getting better in terms of water quality and what
in terms
isn't?
of your impact on it. Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about the water quality in terms of the fisheries.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's getting better? I think in the game fish area, people are catching record numbers of walleye and all sorts of great game fish on Lake Erie. So it's sort of an interesting message out there. On the one hand, and this, you know, all of our wildlife experts in the fisheries will tell you it is better than ever for a whole variety of reasons in Lake Erie. This is the time to go fishing. So in that context, tourism up, it's looking great. But will it always, right? So we're worried about the future, and we're also more worried about the fisheries of non-game fish and what the impact is on their lives now and what we're going to see in the future. So that's just a little bit, I mean, that's just one tiny piece of, we see it looking really good, but we're worried about the future, but we're concerned about what's going on with the non-game species.
I think from ODA's perspective, what's getting better is something we alluded to earlier, and that is that for the first time, we have across the board a willingness from both the environmental groups, who have oftentimes been our foes, coming together with farmers, sitting at the table with farmers, with legislators, with other stakeholders to say, this is not going to work unless we are all committed to working together with solutions. You know, I think early on, the beginning was a lot of finger pointing. It's not our problem. We're not the cause of the problem. You are. And now I think there's a consensus that says, you know, we all contribute in some way. We admit that we have done a lot of great things, but we need to do more. And for me, the acceptance of the fact that all of these stakeholders across the board are saying we need to do more is the step we need to truly move forward. What's not working, I suppose, would be our concern about what's happened this year in terms of weather. You know, I can think of no other industry that is so controlled by weather as our agribusiness and our ag industries. And farmers looking at whether or not 2019 was an anomaly or a sign of things to come. And so, you know, farmers have to prepare for the fact that maybe we're going to have next year also be a excessive rain year. And how do we prepare for that? I had a conversation with a couple of farmers yesterday afternoon, and you know, one of the groups that we really need to get on board are our ag lenders, because after what's happened this year in terms of, you know, the crop losses and the insurance claims, et cetera, what kind of ability is that farmer going to have to go to an ag lender and say, well, this year I'm going to take a risk and do this? And how willing is the ag lender going to be in that conversation? So that is probably a group we really need to bring into the fold if they're not already there, and they might be, in understanding that this is not going to be fixed, as all of us have talked about, next year or the year after. But, you know, I think explaining or figuring out what the message is going to be, not only to the ag community, but to the general public, about managing their expectations going forward. We're doing great things, but it's going to take time.
So when you think about water quality, I guess I'm gonna talk a little bit. I'm gonna talk in broader terms, I guess. When I was speaking with students at University of Findlay, I did kind of a retrospective of where have we come from an environmental perspective over the last 50 years. So, you know, remember, our major environmental laws came to be in the 1970s, so we really haven't been on this journey for too long relative to environmental protection. So, you know, this year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Cuyahoga River being on fire. Literally, was on fire a lot back then. And how many people, you know, thought at that time that this is beyond repair, this is hopeless. Today you have people kayaking on the river. You can eat fish, not a whole lot of fish.
I just went canoeing there. So.
You can see, you did. You can eat fish. And it's a testament to the hard work of a lot of people to get from being on fire to being in your kayak on the water. So I think we've made some vast improvements in the larger world of water quality, so I think we can't overlook that. But I think what it really comes down to that we have to acknowledge and what we have to do today is to know that it does take vision, takes a lot of hard work, a lot of hard decisions, people at the table, commitment, and action to get things accomplished. So that's where we need to propel ourselves relative to Lake Erie, and we have inland lakes in distress. So our work is not done, but it is achievable if you put enough into it.
Thank you. All three of you, while you were up and giving your presentations regarding your agencies, outlined different focal areas, different programs, and potential directions to go. I'm wondering if each of you might go just a little deeper with one of them that you're most excited about or think has the most promise, as we look to the future?
Well, in the sort of the lead up to the H2O funding, one of the things we did was we took folks out in the Maumee Bay, and we took a whole bunch of scientists and some legislators and some local community leaders and all of us, so we could get a real hands-on look at what we wanted to change in the Bay itself. And so I'm very excited about those projects. I'm hoping we get them kicked off soon. We're in negotiations with folks to get everything lined up. But these are wetlands actually in the Bay, which is, you know, our area of greatest concern up there. It's what's flowing out of Maumee Bay. So I'm very excited to get those particular projects moving. I think it'll be a great tangible sign to everybody that we're moving on this. And then as we get the monitoring in place, we see what impact it actually has. But this is something very different for that bay, and I know the Port Authority and the city, they're as excited as we are to see if we can make a difference there. So it's a different kind of project, and we're excited to get that one ready to go, and it's one a lot of people went and looked at and have support for. So I'm excited to see where we go with that one.
I think when we talk about the Department of Agriculture, I tell people that our mission is twofold across the board: education and safety. And so when it comes to our plan for H2 Ohio, I think we're really talking about a culture change. In my lifetime, you know, I remember the early days of farming on the farm. We tilled up that field every single year. Now we know from the data and from experts all over the world that leaving that field alone, not stirring up that legacy phosphorus, is probably the most important thing that we can do. And so it's about educating farmers that even though this is what you did in the 80s, we know now that we need to move forward in a different direction. And while we have a great deal of farmers in Ohio who are doing great things, we need to get more farmers on board with this basic concept that not stirring up the land is probably the most important thing we can do, combined with a soil test which is going to tell the story of our land and making sure that we're applying those nutrients according to that soil test. It's a culture change. And for us, that presents the biggest challenge in terms of hiring the right experts in each county, through the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, through the Extension Office, because these are the people that the farmers have held long-term relationships, as our family has, who they trust, who can really market these practices, combined with the funding that's going to be channeled and funneled through these entities to help the farmers really accept the fact that, you know, not only is this the right thing to do for their farm, the bottom line is going to be reflected in a positive manner when we do these things.
Well, I know I have a bunch of people from the EPA team here, and some of them from the water program. So, you know, just so people are aware, I mean, we have a full division of surface water and a division of drinking and groundwater. So we have hundreds of people on my team devoted to water quality every day, and that's their focus, that's their mission, that's what they do. And I know they and I are very excited to be plugged into the equation from that perspective, because that's their world. So, you know, providing our technical assistance and our resources and our horsepower, we're all in. We're excited for that. For me personally, one of the dimensions of H2 Ohio that is exciting for me is the opportunity to reach into communities that, quite frankly, I feel have been forgotten from a water perspective. And, you know, we talk about no one disputes the importance of water. You know, it's life. It sustains us in so many ways, but there are people who don't have access to water. And to be able to get water to people is probably one of the most exciting things. If I could help accomplish that under my tenure, I will walk away feeling fulfilled in a lot of respects. So that's the piece that I'm anxious to get started on. it will be challenging, but I think the rewards will be great. And you change the lives of people when you do that. So that excites me.
Director Stevenson, I'm going to follow up with you with another question you talked about as one of the areas that EPA is really looking at, the water quality monitoring capabilities and more of the monitoring data. Could you just talk a little bit more about what kinds of monitoring data and how you think that can be implemented in the future? Director Pelanda talked about, for example, the additional soil testing and what that can do and how important that is. So what kind of monitoring data are you looking at?
Okay. Well, I'm going to try not to get way out of my lane. But it's my understanding, so I've, again, talked with the folks on our water teams, and we're at the ready to help fill gaps, if there are gaps out there in terms of, do we need more monitoring gauges out there in some of our tributaries or rivers to collect data that will be important to us, not only from a nutrient standpoint, but I also understand that it would be helpful to be able to do some more monitoring just related to rainfall, flood prediction. And so those are the types of things that if we can provide more resources or potential funding to support those efforts, that's one of the things that we've been looking at for potential funding, just gauges and just increasing our monitoring capabilities where it makes sense to do so.
Great, thank you. Both Director Pelanda and Director Mertz, my next question is directed to the two of you. Both of you in your presentations talked about the importance of the water management, the water retention. Director Pelanda, you talked specifically about the water retention reservoirs and conservation buffers. Director Mertz, you talked about the wetlands and all of that. I was wondering if the two of you might talk about how those two foci for both of you might work together, those two programs, and what we could expect from that.
So one of the programs I hope we'll be able to work together on is the CREP program, right? So that's one of the most important programs out there to our department for a number of reasons. And, it's not always easy, right, to recruit the people to participate in it. I think, folks were standing in line for the Scioto CREP program, but maybe not so much for the Lake Erie program. So how do we make that more attractive? It's federally funded, partly state funded. Our Division of Wildlife stands ready to provide bonuses because of benefits outside of the water quality piece of it, creating more habitat and providing access for hunting. So that's something that our agency has long been a proponent of. We think it makes a difference. The CREP program will increase the value of those buffer zones and filtering the water from the field to the ditch or the stream or wherever it's headed. So that is one of the key programs we hope to be supportive of the Department of Agriculture as we make our best efforts to make that more attractive to farmers throughout the region.
And to follow up with that, the CREP program is not without its issues. And we were in Wyandotte County. Our team was in Wyandotte County last week to look at several fields that were enrolled in the CREP program. And we need to be talking to our congressman because the current federal rules do not allow farmers to mow the fields that are involved in CREP. And farmers do not like the way that the fields look. Without mowing it, the weeds get in not only the CREP area, but also in the rest of the fields. So it's important to understand that there are some issues in terms of incentivizing farmers to go forward. And hopefully working with our legislators on both the state and federal level, we can iron out some of these issues so that going forward, farmers will want to be more engaged in that. I'm really excited. Director Mertz shared a map with me last week about some of the inland, as I call it, inland wetlands that she's already working with farmers who voluntarily, based upon things that have been happening in recent years, are looking at not only wetlands in forms of farmland preservation, but really when we think of wetlands, we think of the coastal wetlands, but there are much more creative ways to use the CREP program and a basic wetlands concept to provide more habitat that way. So there's a real natural link between our two agencies when we talk about water retention and ways that we can do that.
Thank you. I'm wondering, maybe we can start this out with Director Stevenson kicking us off, but Director Stevenson, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about what advancements you think we might need in technology or in policy that could help us to be more effective.
Director Mertz and I, we believe in technology. We just have this side conversation going, and I'm going to confess, I'm not the water technology subject matter expert, so just don't laugh out loud when you hear this, but you know, my world, I come from the regulatory world. I was an inspector. I worked a lot with businesses, so my brain is more wired on kind of the industrial side of things, and you know, for years and years and years, we've got industrial solutions for emission controls. And we, you know, from a wastewater treatment perspective, we know how to handle phosphorus. So, you know, in my mind, I wonder, like, what are those treatment technologies that are out there that could be applied in a broader perspective to treat the non-point source runoff? And it's a very lofty vision that maybe we would be able to get some type of technology contraptions out there as part of our portfolio of what we do. You know, there are other states, and we've talked a lot with other states, again, just to benchmark on what are they doing, what's working, what are the innovative things that they're thinking about, and trying to glean some ideas there. And some states are moving in some interesting directions with respect to large-scale type treatment systems that might be part of the equation here. And so I think there's some space for that type of discussion. Again, there's not going to be one thing that you can hook up and turn on and solve the problem, but I am intrigued about the possibility of just having more open discussion about where can technology potentially take us.
Thank you. Earlier in your presentations, Director Pelanda, you mentioned the think tank that had been brought together with the charge of looking at what would be most cost-effective and have the biggest ROI. I wondered if you might just tell our audience a little bit more about the think tank and its process and what we can expect, perhaps a little bit of a sneak peek as we head into next week.
If I could, though, just to rest 1 minute and really sing the praises of OSU professor Dr. Robert Staley. At a cabinet retreat recently, he spoke to us about the future of agriculture. And the future of agriculture is artificial intelligence. And just instead of being afraid of robotics as it relates to agriculture, to really embrace it in a positive way. I left so inspired that he is coming to speak to our department at a mandatory meeting, because I want everybody to hear his message. Talking with the students from OSU Ag School, talking with FFA students in high school, and talking with 4-H'ers, talk to them about what their vision of ag is. It's about nutrient management for animals. It's about artificial intelligence. It's about robotics. And I am excited because I know that with these young people's leadership, the agriculture and food industry will continue to be the #1 industry in Ohio. So I just wanted to say that Ohio State is doing some amazing things with its leaders in moving agriculture forward. So, the question.
I was asking about the think tank, and you had mentioned the charge to be both cost-effective and the biggest ROI.
The governor has assembled water quality scientists from around the world to come and talk with us and really think outside the box, not to be afraid of exploring this idea or that idea when it comes to, you know, the biggest return on investment. 2 Fridays ago, we had the team come together and they put all of these diagrams on the board showing, you know, based upon the data that we had, which of these ideas you know, were going to be most effective. One I remember distinctly was, what is the cost of creating a new wetland? What is the cost of reshaping it or rehabilitating it? And what is the cost of enhancing it? You know, to look at that from 3 different perspectives has really been exciting to us in terms of, wow, where could this work? And it's not the idea of one idea is better than another. It's, we know from the science that we have to date that in order for this program to be effective, multiple interventions are going to have to happen on a single farmland.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about giving the farmer the education and the incentive and the funds to explore multiple interventions, such as soil testing, such as cover crops, that may or may not be applicable or even beneficial on an entire farmland, but giving them the incentive to explore that along with the think tank. So I think one of the things that has been beneficial is that they're forcing us to think outside our departments, outside the normal framework, to say, what about adding this intervention in this situation? Just as I've talked about inland wetlands, or how Mary would describe that, for a conventional farm.
Okay. We're going to get ready to open up the questions then to our audience. To help get us started, we had some of our audience members contributed questions in advance in writing. So I'm going to kick us off with one of those questions, and whoever wants to respond to this question. It came in from Thomas Hall, who I know is here somewhere. And his question is, a recent proposal suggests handling pig waste the same as we do human waste. What are your thoughts on this idea?
Okay, I think that's probably mine.
Yeah.
So, this relates to recently several cities in Northwest Ohio have adopted resolutions asking the Director of Agriculture to create policies that would require that. I would say at the outset, and as a former legislator, there are certain things I can do as the director. There are certain things that require legislative action. Mandating this kind of a change in the way we handle manure would require legislative and statutory action. Mm-hmm. So while I'm receptive to the thought behind it, that would be something that the legislature needs to take up and consider.
Okay. Thank you, Director Pelanda. Are there other questions from the audience at this time? I think they have a microphone that Joe will get to you. If you'd please stand, state your name, and then get to your question, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Royer. When it comes to nutrient effluent, the obvious has been addressed, ag, farm. My question is, has the impact of urban effluents, urban nutrient effluents from our big cities, be it Toledo, Cleveland, St. Mary's, or even Salina, has this been tracked? Are we watching it? Are we collecting data on this? Considering they reported half of our garbage and food goes down into the disposals with increased population and the effect of aging sewage disposal systems, how is that affecting our water quality? Is it being tracked? And what have you thought about that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that one's mine, right? There's a lot in there. I'm going to try and unpack it as best I can. So just generally speaking, you're totally on target with, if the undercurrent there is overall concern about aging infrastructure. Well, yeah, welcome to our world, because we have significant challenges related to aging infrastructure, and whenever infrastructure fails, that causes a lot of problems, including water quality problems. But I think we also have to acknowledge, so from an urban perspective, a couple things here. Our communities, especially on the shores of Lake Erie, have been hard at work for a long, long time in investing hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure upgrades to address water quality challenges. So, if you think about the world of combined sewer overflows, again, in the 1970s, billions of gallons of raw sewage going right into rivers, lakes, including Lake Erie. So fast forward to today, that number is substantially lower. There's still work to do. That's not to say there's not work to do on the infrastructure side, but communities have invested substantial amounts of money to address water quality issues that they are responsible for. So we can't overlook that. Again, the needs for infrastructure improvement are vast. The dollars are more limited. We have communities that continue to struggle with just affording to maintain their infrastructure, let alone pay for upgrades. So that is the challenge, I think, for Ohio. It's really a national challenge. But there is opportunity. I think we would also agree that there's a lot of opportunity for urban runoff management and really doing more with that to improve water quality. So I think we're making some headway in the agency and working with communities to entertain more green infrastructure options, things that will help them better manage runoff in ways that are effective, but yet maybe more affordable for them. So we are hard at work, but there's definitely work to do. And in terms of tracking and quantifying, I mean, it's, you know, we do a pretty good job at working with our communities to figure out how they're progressing. A lot of them are under orders or compliance schedules to make upgrades, so they're tracked in that manner. I think what we can plug into the equation is just more robust water quality monitoring to figure out what kind of reductions are we seeing from a contaminant perspective. So not sure if that, I gave a lot back to you, and hopefully that was somewhat responsive.
Just because you mentioned St. Mary's, so recently we had the opportunity to meet with some of the government leadership, if you will, in St. Mary's, and I'll say I think they are very focused on how they can improve water quality there, and they've done a lot of the spade work, and they specifically were talking to us about some innovative approaches with some wetland treatment trains that might help with the water quality issues there specifically. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it happen, but I could, you know, it was obvious they'd been working on it for some time. They have some specific projects in mind, and it's something that they're paying a lot of attention to, which was really impressive, and I hope we find a way to work with them.
Thank you. We have another question here, I think, with Josh, if we can. Oh, we have one over here first, and then we'll come to Josh.
Okay. Brian Williams, and this is for Director Pelanda. ODA is already underfunded, and the vast majority of the budget is for enforcement. But with cover crops and more robust rotations and small grains, how do you then develop incentives for farmers to use those practices, and more importantly, how do we develop markets and supply chains for those small grains?
My dad always taught me to question the premises. I don't think ODA is underfunded, and I don't think the majority of our money is used for enforcement. So with all due respect, I think that from ODA's perspective, you know, the crown jewels of our department are our two state-of-the-art laboratories, one for consumer protection and the other for livestock. So certainly every agency could argue that they need more money, but I think that with the H2O Ohio monies that have been received through the legislative process, that again, we've identified the most important thing to do is to change the culture and to educate farmers about how not only beneficial to the land these soil tests, nutrient management plans, and cover crops are, but to also, you know, incentivize them by providing a market for cover crops. That's one of the challenges. You know, I've traveled the state and looked at different cover crop projects. We've got some great experts across the state, but you know, when you talk about a market for radishes, which is a great cover crop, you've also got to incentivize them by saying, and we're going to provide a market for it. So challenges ahead, certainly, but we believe that through the Soil and Water Conservation District offices, through the Extension offices, we can provide that education and those incentives to the farmers to go forward with these best practices.
Great. I think we're to Josh, and then we'll move to another question as well.
So Josh Knights with the Sustainability Institute here at Ohio State. Thanks, directors, for being here. I'm just asking for a few words from each of you. What could you use from a partner like Ohio State in terms of the work that you're about to embark on?
Well, I'll begin, and I think I've talked at length in my answers about how we are already partnering with Ohio State in many ventures in this, and we really look forward to continuing that partnership, both in the research aspect of it, in the advocacy, and the education. So I think I've laid the foundation pretty well from the department standpoint that we have an ongoing relationship with OSU, and we look forward to continuing that partnership.
I would just add, I mean, the partnership is invaluable. We can't do this without everyone at the table, all disciplines, across the board, from academia to our agencies to the conservation groups. I mean, it really is, like I said, it's all hands on deck. We're all in partnership. So I think what Ohio State and others bring to the table just from an institutional academic perspective is just, that level of knowledge and experience and scientific understanding and the ability to help us carve out a path for Ohio is so important. So from a scientific perspective, I see it as absolutely necessary. And the fact that you have, again, students with you to bring to the table. I mean, we really do need innovative thinking here, and we need to think about how do we leverage the technology pieces of this to move us forward. So just the engagement, creating those opportunities, and really getting people in the door as quickly as possible to be thinking critically with us is what I think you bring to the table, and we appreciate it.
So I think is really helpful, and many of your colleagues at Ohio State have heard this now from me, is the translation service from the academic work to what I'm supposed to do with it, right? So there is great research going on, and it's how to translate that from the data that's been collected and the academic notes that have been prepared. How do I move that to what I'm supposed to do, right? How do we move it to a place where it actually changes my behavior and affects my decisions, right? So it's really looking at it from a perspective of what decisions do I need to make? I need to decide where we're going to build something, what it's going to look like, how we measure if it makes a difference, how we change it, so it's really that translation, and my sympathies go out to all of the academics that I have peppered with numerous questions. I think I've tortured many of the researchers here at OSU because I'm so curious. It's because I really, truly care about what you do. So I've had people sit in lengthy sessions with me. We've had lots of email exchanges back and forth while I really try to drill down into, okay, you're telling me that your model shows this, this, and this. I need you to explain that to me further. I really want to take it all the way back to, okay, what does this mean in terms of what I do that's different, and the decisions we make, and how we implement programs on the ground that are going to change, what we see in the lake or what we see in water quality across Ohio. So that piece of it for me is really important going forward, because I am confident and have a lot of trust and faith in the research that's going on. I just got to figure out how to interpret it in a way that it's changing what we do, and there's not research over here and action over here without those lines in between. So I'm sure many of your colleagues will tell you that I've spent a lot of time with them trying to make that connection.
Well, Mary, let me reassure you that for an academic, curiosity is not being pestered at all. It's our lifeblood, and there's nothing we like better than having people ask us a lot of questions about our science, so thank you for doing that. We're going to have time for just one more question, and with all due respect to all of our audience here, I would actually like to leave this last question for one of our students. So if I could get a microphone to one of our students, and give them an opportunity to ask a question. Okay, we have one over here. Please go ahead. Please make sure you stand and give your name and ask your question.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for coming out this morning and sharing your time with us. My name's Kate Capper. I'm an environmental science major, and I'm in the Sierra Club here at Ohio State. And one of our recent discussions was about the Columbus Community Bill of Rights, which concerns some hazardous waste that's being imported and dumped into landfills just north of Columbus in the Olentangy and Scioto watersheds. I was wondering if there was anything taken into consideration in H2 Ohio or any of the other policy initiatives that deals with or considers this Bill of Rights.
Did you say Gabe? Cade? Cade, I'd like to, if you have a few minutes after this, I would like to talk with you. I'm going to confess, I'm not aware of the Bill of Rights issue that you're posing. So I probably should know. I should know it. I don't. So I would like to talk with you, but just generally speaking, and I want to make sure I understand the question of, so I started off in the hazardous waste world, so I'm with you for some of that. You know, in terms of what is allowable, in terms of what facilities can bring in, and can they accept hazardous waste and the cross-state transport and that type of issue. I mean, it's Ohio. We do allow for facilities to accept hazardous waste. They need to have certain authorizations to do that. So it's, you know, it's something that's legally allowed. But I think I need to better understand the situation. If it's something that is not in alignment with what the law would allow, or if it's a facility or an operation that would be operating outside of the scope of regulation, certainly we would want to address that, and that would even be outside of the context of H2 Ohio. So if you have a few minutes to talk, I'd like to talk with you afterwards and get more information and respond to you directly on that. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, you heard earlier as they talked that one of the new things that's happening is the strength of this collaboration and the strength of this team. Certainly in having the privilege of working with all three of them, I can attest to the strength of that collaboration and team, and I hope you'll all join me now in thanking our three directors for joining us today. We also believe that here in our College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences, that a fundamental strength of our college is our breadth that runs through all three of those divisions: the food sciences, the agricultural sciences, and the environmental sciences, well represented within our School of Environment and Natural Resources, among other departments that we have. So please also join me in thanking our school and its director, Jeff Sharp, in hosting this event and organizing it for us. I'd also like to thank all of you for your participation in being here with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Director Jeff Sharp.
Thank you. As our tradition at the Environmental Professionals Network, we'd like to give each one of you a certificate of appreciation, which, okay, there. I wish when we would have started this event 8 years ago that we would have done some network analysis of the sort of interconnections that we had before we started bringing people together and where we are today. I would have to say that the water issues converge with the Environmental Professionals Network in a way that I hope that we've built capacity and we've contributed to the conversation. Joe and I, some of you may know, are both sociologists, and so what we're most interested in is how communities, how people self-organize to sort of manage sort of environmental challenges. And I would have to say the way Ohio has responded to the water issue is probably a prime example, I think, of capacity building. And what I'm excited to see is not only as we deal with with H2O or the current problems, or building the capacity to deal with future problems. Because we were talking about the Cuyahoga 50 years ago, we were talking about a variety of different things probably 25 years ago, and today we're talking about Lake Erie again. But who knows, we're going to be talking about the Ohio River probably in 5 years or something like that in a major way. So building capacity is important, and we appreciate everybody's participation in this event to help build that capacity. Before we conclude, I'd like to bring to your attention our upcoming EPN events and details for our next 2 EPN breakfast programs. For those of you in attendance who would like to learn more about those monthly breakfast programs and engage with other ways to network across our community, I encourage you to sign up at the EPN website, epn.osu.edu. It's free and simple to do. Our November 19th event touches on topical and important themes related to our state's wildlife assets and outdoor forms of recreation, including hunting, fishing, birding, and hiking. We will explore how these activities and their users impact the degree of wildlife conservation funding and protection in Ohio. In advance of today, our 2 November keynote breakfast speakers, Kendra Wecker, Chief of the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and Naomi Edelson, Senior Director for Wildlife Partnerships with the National Wildlife Federation, prepared some remarks to share with you about our November 19th EPN program.
Hi, I'm Kendra Wecker, Chief of the Ohio Division of Wildlife. Please join me at the EPN breakfast program at the Nationwide and Farm Bureau 4-H Center at The Ohio State University on November 19th, 2019. We're going to be discussing a variety of strategies to fund conservation in Ohio. I'll be joining Naomi Edelson with the National Wildlife Federation, and together we'll discuss the history of conservation funding in Ohio, as well as new strategies we're looking at to enhance funding for future generations.
Hi Ohio, I'm Naomi Edelson. I'm the Senior Director at National Wildlife Federation, and I'm really looking forward to coming to talk to you in November. I am going to come and talk about America's wildlife crisis and what you can do to help. I think, as you already know, we're in the middle of the 6th extinction with many reasons going on, and we have problems with wildlife here in America as well. We, the state wildlife agencies, I'm really thrilled to be joined today with Kendra Wecker, the Director of the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and the state wildlife agencies are on the front lines of conserving America's wildlife. We, though, need to help them do their job, and they have identified more than 12,000 species of greatest conservation need. And in order to meet those challenges, they need much more robust funding, they need more capacity, and they need more expertise. And I'm going to talk to you about 4 ways we can do that. 1 is to build a coalition. 2 is to elevate the wildlife crisis. 3 is to engage the state wildlife agency leadership. And 4 is to secure robust funding. I look forward to sharing more with you and see you in November.
So please spread the word on this. The keynote address will include a breakfast, and then there'll be some additional programming there. I'm excited at this event that we are actually going to extend into, if you want to stay for a longer program, a catered lunch featuring cooking demonstrations from the Ohio Division of Wildlife's Wild Ohio's Harvest Program, which, if I have it correctly, Joe, will include a Fish Taco Tuesday with fresh walleye and perch. So if you have an interest in joining us for that event, please do so. You can check out further information at the registration desk or at our website. While you're making your way out, as a final note, please know that we try to make this a zero-waste event. There are instructions above the receptacles here as to where you should toss your materials, and we appreciate your assistance with this. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.